I was going to say you're always ready to go cycling.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Should we kick off?
Yeah, definitely. It would be cool.
Good. So I thought it'd be really cool for kind of the next Instagram live. I'd hoped to do it a couple of weeks back, but was a bit preoccupied. To do one with you and to talk about sort of on-road versus off-road, because this is a transition that I did sort of 3 years ago now, and it's still taken me 3 years to kind of get to grips a bit with riding a mountain bike and get into off-road, because I think that there's a lot more to it than riding on the road, and perhaps we can have a bit of a discussion around that, because you rode at Badlands last year, which is off-road and a good entry kind of event into off-road riding, and about maybe your ambitions and some of the differences to help people understand what the differences to on-road to off-road are, and maybe how they can get started.
Yeah, yeah, this would be definitely be cool, because I think, or from my experience, on road, it's pretty easy, because I can rely on good infrastructure, like buying food in supermarkets, petrol stations, whatever. You will find probably some bike shops along the route, and be capable to buy spare parts. You have hotels where you can go when there is bad weather or something. You can, I don't know, go to the doctor, to pharmacies, if you have any health problems or stuff. And this was one of the things I already learned in Badlands. You are in a completely different situation when you go off road, because also in Badlands, which was well, compared to the stuff you can do off road, it was like a small loop. But still, like in the Garafe Desert or somewhere, you had like 100 kilometers where was nothing, not any fountain, no supermarket, no bar, not even any house or bush. And well, to be honest, I did quite a good mistakes, some good mistakes there. Had too less water, for example, and that's why. It's interesting to learn from your, and what were the main points you experienced first in the transition.
Yeah, I think the first point to pick out from everything you said is resupply. Resupply is just completely different off road. You cannot take quite as much risk, can you? Or you can't just hope that there's going to be a shop or even a tap on attached to a church or something around the corner, because it's just not going to be there. And for example, it depends a bit on the race. So if you're going to Scotland to race the Highland Trail 550, and when you've done your kind of pre-race analysis, you'll know that there's probably going to be quite a lot of water there, because it rains a lot. But if you go to Badlands and the desert, it gets quite obvious that there's not going to be much water there. Or even when you go to Silk Road Mountain Race in Kyrgyzstan, you can have hundreds of kilometers without water. Now, you also have to consider the fact that 100 kilometers on the road is not 100 kilometers off-road. 100 kilometers off-road could take you the better part of a day, really. Whereas 100 kilometers on the road, you can knock out that distance, even if you're quite tired, a bit dehydrated, and running low on food, not much slower than you would ride it if you're well energized. And I think that's one of the kind of key differences on why resupply is so important, because when you are off-road and you get tired and you slow down because you haven't got water or food, you will come to a stop, more or less, quite a lot easier, because of the resistance of the terrain rather than on-road.
Yeah. So is there anything like, do you have any kind of like your top 5 key items you would recommend to someone who wants to start into off-road bikepacking? So what are like the most important things you should consider to take with you? What you would not take like on the road, or what from what kind of mistakes you shouldn't do in terms of keeping or taking stuff with you?
Yeah, I think the first one is to kind of follow on from the point about resupply, is to be more prepared, because the eventualities are kind of more serious, like running out of water, running out of food, or if it rains or you get a puncture or a mechanical, you can kind of end up stuck in the middle of nowhere with these problems, and perhaps there's no one else around to help you. Whereas if you were on the tarmac, you might be able to call even an ambulance quite easily to get help. So I I go to these events a lot more prepared with a kind of a lot, having reduced the risk a lot than if it was an on-road event, you know, so rain jacket, rain trousers, extra water capacity. So the first one would be like being over prepared. That over preparedness can come around secondly through doing a really good pre-event or race analysis. If you're racing on the tarmac, maybe you can just take the route and you know, oh, there'll be some shops every now and again, and it's not too big a problem. Or you don't need to worry quite so much what the terrain is going to really be like because it's tarmac, so it's not too big a worry. Whereas off-road, the terrain can vary from, you know, quite smooth, nice gravel that you could almost ride on road tires to you need a mountain bike because it's really off-road.
Yeah.
And that will come around through doing really good analysis. So I think that those are the top two, so being over-prepared in the analysis. Thirdly, I think you need to be quite competent with fixing your bike because if something goes wrong, and it's more likely to go wrong off-road, this would be the other thing. So tubeless punctures, breaking a derailleur hanger, maybe one of your bags breaks or these sort of things, the wear and tear is greater. So being able to fix things and having everything that you need, all of the tools to do all of that. And that might even look like being more prepared and carrying an extra inner tube or extra tubeless things to repair the kind of, in English we call them like plugs or anchovies to repair. Mm-hmm. So being able to repair everything and making sure you have everything to repair everything. I think the fourth one would probably be like comfort. So a lot of people go to the off-road events and they might just ride a gravel bike with 40C tires because it's kind of what they have. And I think a lot of people underestimate. You laugh.
That's what I have.
Yeah. But so these days, I more or less always ride a hardtail mountain bike, and it's because of with suspension on the front, and it's because of comfort. Because realistically, off-road for 6 hours isn't that big a deal, even the toughest off-road. But off-road for 6 days is going to take such a toll on your body, and that extra fatigue that's going to add up over the period of the event might not bother you after 6 hours, but when you get 3 days into that event and your back is aching, your hands are aching and all these things, it's going to slow you down so much. Not only because you're going to just feel bad physically, but mentally it's going to start tiring you down and you're just going to want to stop more and more frequently to rest. And so kind of being like over bikes, as some people might call it, or just going for comfort would be really wise. And reasonably, if you're doing like an off-road event, you're probably going to be running kind of like fast XC mountain bike kind of tires anyway. Mm-hmm. So if you're on a hardtail mountain bike with front suspension or a gravel bike, you've still got the same tires on. And so you can get a nice position. The difference in sort of speed from the two is not actually going to be anything like aerodynamically. You can have that more or less the same. And so ultimately, if you're more comfortable, you're going to be faster over 3-6 days because you're going to be able to keep that speed up and not stop. So those are the 4 tips. So we've got perseverance, we've got really good analysis, we've got knowing how to fix everything, we've got the comfort. A 5th top tip, I think would probably be like, it's not really a tip, but it would be just to get out there and experience it. And don't be kind of too scared of it being off-road or worried about these things, because you could spend a long time, being concerned about what's going to happen. But ultimately, it's really great fun and the experience is so rich that you will enjoy it. And you may never go back.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you mentioned that there is like completely different feeling and also completely different for the body. If you ride off-road, then you do on-road. Do you think, or do you have any advice on the training? I mean, training on the road versus off-road. I mean, you still need to have like the basic endurance and all the stuff. Don't ask for that. But do you think you need like additional skills, or do you do additional exercises like to give your body the strength? Because what I see, I'm actually a bit lazy on doing other things than just training on the bike. I know I could do even more with stretching and all the stuff, but I don't do it. And I tell myself every year, like, let's get started with it, but I don't do it. But on the road, it's pretty easy because you have times for rest. For example, you climb the mountain and then you have like half an hour of rest where you're just rolling down. And when I was riding Badlands, I learned as well that you have not any single minute of rest when you ride, because even in
Yeah.
the descent, all the muscles are like working to keep the bike in balance and stuff like this. Do you recommend any other training than just riding the mountain bike or any other
Yeah,
exercises?
it's a really great question because it's so important. And 4 years ago, I was more or less just like you. I had a really massive engine, and all I did was ride around on the tarmac, and I didn't do much else beyond that. But to race on the road, it's more or less enough. And ultimately, you just sit there and you put out the power, and you stop at the next petrol station to buy some drinks, and then you get back on the bike and you keep putting out the power. And there's not much else to it, really. When you can get the strength that you need to do this by just riding the bike, because the demands on the body are not too great. Whereas when you do start riding off-road, and this is why one of my points was comfort, because the toll that it takes fatigue-wise on your body is quite severe. Mm-hmm. And you pointed out about downhills. Yes, when you're on the tarmac, you can have a half an hour break and go down the downhill. You can eat some food, or you could just rest, and it's not abusing your body. But when you're going down a downhill on an off-road event, it's shaking around your body, like this. And this adds up. So firstly, you're not getting a mental break because you're having to pay attention to where your bike is going. And secondly, it's physically taking a toll on you. And this is one of the reasons that I run front suspension. Now, when I started training like full-time off-road, so one of the things that I have done is I more or less ride off-road 100% of the time now. I don't ride on-road much at all because the events I'm going to do are off-road, and so I need to be training off-road to get my body accustomed to the riding and the energy use. I could do 1 or 2 days on the road and some other days off-road to make the training a bit easier, and this is what you should do in the beginning. Don't start training 7 days a week off-road because the fatigue and the toll on your body will be too much. So you should do maybe 2 days a week off-road to begin, and then build this up as you, and then you can bring it down, and this will stop you from getting injury because the movements off-road are completely different. You're not going in a kind of symmetry, either side like this. You're kind of getting shaken around like this and pedaling like this, and that's really quite damaging on the body. And so until your muscles have got used to this, you're going to be more likely to get an injury. I think the other thing is that you can start doing strength exercises, and I do some. I don't think they will probably be the defining difference in these things. I do core exercises, so I'm not kind of doing ab crunches, but I'm doing like planks, bridges, more yoga kind of stuff. And I try and do 15 minutes after like four rides a week. So I like to do it after the ride because that's when I'm tired, so it's going to have quite a good impact on the body. And there's a professor, sports scientist, Inigo Mujica, who's really, really good from the Basque Country. And this is what he proposed, and I really liked it. Mm-hmm. So I try and do that. I have done some actual sort of strength exercises, so, really heavy lifting. But I find if I'm riding my mountain bike in the hills here in Girona and around Catalonia a lot, I'm getting quite a lot of, it's quite steep here, so it's quite high torque on my legs. And so trying to do that riding with strength work is too much on my legs, and I'm too tired. And it's not actually necessary because I can develop the strength I need in my legs and in my core a bit from just doing the riding up the really steep hills. If you don't have really steep hills or steep hills where you live, and you're going to an event where there will be lots of climbing off-road, then I would recommend doing the gym work to get that, because you can't get it on the bike. The other thing that I do more frequently now is like what I'd call rehab exercises. And this is sort of light loads or no load with resistance bands. Mm-hmm. And this is either to prevent injury or to look after injuries I have had. And that would be the kind of the final point is you need to be more considerate of injuries when you're riding off road, because when I rode on road, I never had an injury, and I did 3 years with no injury, and I was 100% for 3 years. And every year I've ridden off road, I've had an injury, from like reasonably annoying to really, really bad. And there is a price to pay with riding off road, and it's probably that injury part. And I do a bit less training overall now, like volume wise, load wise, because I just can't sustain it off road. So when I'm going downhill off road, my heart rate will be 130 beats a minute. You know, this is like endurance pace heart rate. This is what I'd be along the flat, and it's 130 going downhill. Whereas if you were on the road going downhill, it would be 80, maybe 70. So the physical toll is a lot higher. It's probably more comparable to running than it is to on the road cycling. You know, if you're running, your heart rate is up all the time, like trail running. And so it might be worth reading around trail running to see how they do that with the training load and what you can take overall, because it's probably more comparable to riding on road.
What also means not only for training, but also for racing, you need a different kind of nutrition, because you will simply need more energy, because you're always like, you don't have those parts where you just rest and the body is burning less energy. Even in the like rest phases, you are still running a heart rate of 130, so body is burning a lot more. How do you manage, or what do you recommend in terms of nutrition? Do you think you can say, like, is there any percentage how much it costs more in terms of energy the body is consuming, comparing on and off road? So what do you need to put additionally in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends on the event. So if you're doing something that's like a bit smoother terrain, then your heart rate will drop a bit when you are off road, going downhill, and it is a bit easier and it's not quite so demanding. Whereas if you're doing like a true mountain bike event, perhaps the Highland Trail 550, some of the downhills are really technical and you'll be working hard. I think ultimately it's one of these things that you just have to go by feel. And if you've ridden a lot, generally you can start to feel the different phases of hunger or energy need, energy demand. And it's really trying to understand what that feels like so that you can feed before you get too hungry. I kind of generally set a principle of, I'll try and eat this much an hour. And then I know if I'm doing that, I know I'm probably getting enough. And then if I feel a bit hungry, I will just stuff a bunch of food in my face because I'm obviously hungry. I think the other thing is, though, that when you're riding off-road, you can't really eat going downhill, which is the time to eat, because it's when your body has time to digest and there's blood that can go to your stomach. You know, either because you're riding downhill, you can't take both hands off the bars because you'll crash. And that's something to be quite careful of, because if you're a bit tired and you're trying to eat going downhill, you will very likely crash. So when can you eat? You don't want to eat at the bottom of a climb, because then all the blood will be going to your legs up the climb and it won't digest. So you probably have to wait to a flat, and then maybe you need to consider how hard you ride along the flat a bit and maybe reduce that so that there's a bit of blood to your stomach. And I definitely found I did have a bit more GI issues because stuff just wasn't digesting as well going to off-road, because the blood was, you know, there wasn't those really good periods like on-road to eat.
So is there any difference in terms of the stuff you were eating on road versus off road? I mean,
yeah, I think you have less choice off road because there's not a nice shop to stop and buy a cool fizzy drink every 1 hour. You know, I think back to some of the days of doing TCR and when we were racing through the Balkans and it was 40 degrees, 45 degrees Celsius. I could stop every 1 hour and buy some cold drinks to keep me feeling good, and I was able to ride well. Whereas when, you know, perhaps when I went to Atlas Mountain Race in 2019 in February, I came from London where it was like 1 degree, went there and it was 30, 35. So it wasn't super hot, but it was still hot. And I remember a long period, maybe, you know, several hours just in the absolute baking heat in the desert. There was no shade, there was no nothing, and I had just like water, you know, and I had a few electrolyte pills, and I would have killed for like a really nice cold drink and an ice cream, but all I had was water and some electrolyte pills, and I just had to make do with what I had and get on with it. And so I think just being able to perhaps adjust mentally to not having like something nice to look forward to, and just like, this is what I've got, I'll have to make the best of it, and you know, perhaps taking electrolyte pills and things like this as well, being a bit prepared for that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a hard part, I guess, because I'm used to it as well, and it's kind of also for me doing mental games and keeping motivation up. If it's like a hot and 40 degrees, I tell myself like, just pedal along one more hour, and then you can stop the next gas station, get an ice cream, get a Coke. And this is what keeps me going, like on a hot day, or when things are not fine. And if I then think, well, I have something melting in my back and I can eat it in 1 hour, that's not that's not too much motivating. So is there any difference, or how do you manage motivation? You did both. You did road, you did TCR, for example. Are there different? I don't like this this mental training thing. I just think, well, you have to keep the motivation up. Are there different tricks doing it on road versus off road?
Probably not. It's the same sort of thing. You might adjust it. You know, I play the same tricks with myself, you know, cycle 2 more hours and you can stop for 2 minutes, you know, or this kind of thing. You know, perhaps if there's a bit of shade, and I might say, I will cycle until there's that bit of shade, and then I can stop there for 1 minute and just stand there and drink my water, rather than trying to cycle and drink, and then I drink it and then I go. And it's the same sort of thing, really. You just can't, you know, think about the next shop or the next cold drink, because it doesn't exist. So you have to kind of put those things from your mind. And I think once you put them from your mind and you accept that they don't exist and you can only work within the boundaries of what you have, it's not so much of a problem, really. And you'll just be eating some dried stuff from your bag that you bought yesterday, you know. But like, it's a good, in Kyrgyzstan, was it 2 years ago now, I had like freeze-dried food, and I took like 25 packets of this freeze-dried food to eat throughout the race, so that I could just eat this because it was easy. And with 2 days or 3 days to go, I was sick of this food. Like the taste, it made me almost vomit. But it was what I had, and I had to eat it. And I wasn't going to waste time going to shops when I had this. So I just had to eat this stuff down, and it tasted disgusting. And there was no enjoyment in that. And so it took all of that away. And so I tried to find other things to kind of bring enjoyment. Maybe I thought about what I was going to eat when I finished the race, or this sort of stuff.
Yeah, interesting. Well, what else? What else should we talk about? What about the electronic stuff? You run a Dynamo hub, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. The electronics. It depends. So for like the Highland Trail 550, which is a true mountain bike event, and you're going slowly, you're walking, a Dynamo, you could use it for maybe 40% of the time, 50% of the time. But other times it's not really suitable. So you'd still have to carry a battery powered light and things anyway. So it depends on the event. If I'm going to Silk Road Mountain Race, I would take a Dynamo, like the K-Light with the light and the charger. And then I can charge whatever I need to charge, maybe my music to keep me motivated, or my phone if I need, and the power, the headlamp. I'll often use a like head torch. I actually have it right here.
Yeah.
I'm sat next to all of my stuff like this, and it mounts on my helmet like this. And then when you move ahead, when you're racing off-road at nighttime, you can see the trail, because if you just have the light on the front of the bike, you can't see where the trail is going. So you want a light on the front on the bars and a light on your helmet, so you can look around like this. And then it's especially helpful when you're trying to find a bivvy spot at 3 in the morning. You can use the light to look left and right of the road. So there are a few things like that that differ slightly between road and off-road, because yeah, a dynamo won't work all the time, so you have to carry some decent battery-powered light, and then you probably carry like a cache battery, you know, that you've charged up as well, in case the dynamo is not charging or something else. You've got to be just a lot more self-sufficient, because the last thing you want is to be out there at 2 a.m, your light dies, and then if you're actually trying to get around as quickly as you can, you're not going to be going anywhere until daylight at 6, 7 in the morning, and that's not, you know, it's game over. So
yeah. So what about other electronic parts on the bike? Do you try to avoid them and better to have like more flexible devices, like not the Garmin Edge, but how is the battery?
yeah, so with the navigation, yeah, so I always have my phone on me, and I have like the Rider GPS app on there, and then because it's like a big screen and it's color with really good maps, I find that that's actually the easiest and quickest way to like investigate a route if I need to go a different way or check I'm going the right way. I often use it's called the E-Trex, and it's made in about 1930 or something like this, but it just keeps working. But it takes batteries, AA batteries, or you can use a recharge pack in it and then put AAs in if you want. I use this because it lasts for like 36 or 48 hours with like the lithium batteries in it. And when you are riding off-road, you want to have the screen on all the time with the backlight and the map on all the time, so that you're following, because it's the route, and because it's fixed route. You know, if you're racing TCR, it doesn't matter if you can see the screen or not at nighttime, as long as it pings before a turn, or you can just push the button and check it. But off-road, you can't really take your hands off the bars to push the screen, to see when the turn is. And if you've gone off the route, God knows how long till you get back on the route, and then you've got to try and find the trail. So this was one of the big things that I learned early on, was like, you want to see the map all the time on the screen to make life easy for yourself. But if you do that with one of the battery-powered devices, sort of one of the Wahoos, or even the Garmin kind of Edge series, so the 530, the 1030, the battery will just die so quickly. And then you're trying to charge that up, and you could charge that up with a cache battery pack. But sometimes just having AAs is really useful, especially in a place like Kyrgyzstan. Say your dynamo dies and you can't charge a cache battery, and you've only got that Edge series which you need to recharge, you're probably not really going to go anywhere very fast. So I think having a backup of things that like takes a different power source, whether that's like actual physical batteries rather than a rechargeable battery, is quite sensible. And that would probably be the same for lights, unless you trust them really well. But having maybe a dynamo light and a rechargeable light by a battery, or a batteries light, and then just two sources, because it's more likely something will break off-road.
Yeah. We got one good question on the chat, which I really like. What about emergencies, especially like the weather is changing fast in the mountains? I always carry like a space blanket, a down jacket, and I will probably be fine, because I will find in the next village or somewhere any shelter. And if it's just a bus stop or whatever, I can just hide there, for example, from the rain. Off-road, sometimes there is simply nothing. So you already told, like, have a proper rain jacket, have proper rain pants is the one thing. But do you take like additional stuff like tent or whatever, just to hide from storm hitting or heavy rain?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, it's a good question, and your question allows me to make a really good point. In the end of the day, I think both of us can sit here and just say this is riding bikes, you know, and it's important, but it's not that important. And the most important thing is your safety, your life, and these things, and just being healthy. And maybe in the early days of racing on road, I would take quite a lot of risk with carrying very little stuff. But I quickly learned, when going off-road and going to some extreme environments, it's just, I'd say, not sensible. And anything else would be more impolite than not sensible. And I would strongly discourage it. For example, when I go to Kyrgyzstan to race Silkman mountain race, I take a tent. It's a very light tent, and it's not really like, it wouldn't do great on Everest, but it's a tent and it's shelter. I take a really good sleeping bag, and I take a sleeping pad. Now, these things, they weigh together 1.6 kilos or something like this. And 1.6 kilos is not going to be the reason I lose or win the event at all. Like, it's just not going to be the case. And I think people get fixated on being really lightweight sometimes first. And I wrote something on this in my knowledge section on my website. People think about weight first rather than the other important variables that are first. Weight's a second, third, or even a non-considerate thing, really. If you've got loads of money, you can think about weight and buy expensive kit. But if you don't, then you think about things like, safety or, okay, the reason I take the tent to Kyrgyzstan is, say I'm in the middle of nowhere, my wheel breaks, I need to fix my wheel, there's no one around, it starts lashing it down with rain or even snowing or windy, and I don't have a tent. I'm fucked, to use another word. I'm either going to get cold, I'm going to get wet. And ultimately, what I probably have to do is, rather than actually trying to fix my wheel, have to start pushing the bike so that I'm not getting cold and hypothermic while sitting there. Whereas if you've got a tent, and a tent, weighs maybe 500 grams more than a bivvy, and most people would be taking a bivvy, you can put your tent up, takes 5 minutes at the most. You can put your, probably put your stove on, because you probably should have a stove if you're in Silk Road Mountain Race, boil yourself a tea, start fixing your wheel or your bike or whatever's broken, or maybe you're not feeling well, drink your tea, maybe eat some food, get it sorted out. You feel really re-energized when you finish it. You're nice, warm, you're dry. Take the tent down, get going again. And I struggle to understand some people's logic sometimes on these things, because I think that not only is it a safety point, but it's actually also an efficiency and a speed and an energy point as well, that these things can allow you to do that. But as a sort of like off the cuff thing, I think it still works on road as well. And I know, not to pick at you, but it's a good example. at Two Volcano Sprint last year, the weather was atrocious, and you got wet and you got cold. And if you had quite light minimal kit, but if you'd had like a really good rain jacket, rain trousers, hat, gloves, like really good stuff, and waterproof socks, it probably wouldn't have happened.
No problem. Yeah.
And these things would have weighed 600 grams for you to take. And there's no way Ulrich Bartholmoes would not win a race because he was carrying 600 extra grams of stuff. And I think it's a good point for us to make, because sometimes people look at what we do and go really light, and perhaps we have the experience to go lighter and more minimal than other people should do. But even here, I'm sitting here saying, I don't actually go that minimal, because 1 kilo is nothing in the scale of these things. And when you're off-road, like, it's so important.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good.
Have you got, so to wrap up, have you got any off-road events planned for this year? And if not, I'm going to have to take you riding again to get you energized to go racing off-road.
Yeah, well, definitely. I will start, let's say, a bit more easy with gravel stuff around here in Catalonia. There will be a few events announced soon. I will do Class Marc de Traca, which is not a big one. It's 360 kilometers here around Girona. It's still off-road, but it's not like that heavy. So I will probably not take a tent to this one.
No, no,
near home anyway.
No, you'll be done by lunchtime.
Yeah. So this is more easy, but the other thing I will do is the capitals, which is connecting 4 major cities of Catalonia, and it's 700 kilometer gravel with some serious climbing. But still, it's near infrastructure, so there will be parts on the road in where you will find supermarkets and stuff. So it's not too remote, and I guess those kind of events are pretty good to get a feeling for it, to start in, to try things, as I did last year. On Badlands, I learned I will never ever do a race like this again without a backpack full of water. Already learned some stuff there, which I will now add to to the things I take to a race and or to an event, and we'll do it this year, and simply we'll try to gain some more experience, and definitely we'll come back to share some kilometers off road with you as well.
Good. Yeah, we should go riding again.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much for your time, Ulrich. That was really interesting.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, James.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to talk about this, and hopefully we can do it again soon with some more information.
Perfect. See you soon, guys. Bye.
Cool. Bye.